Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on the RISE News Channel. Right now with me in the studio, I still have Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, and Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. Well, if I have Yemi Adamolekun right out there with me, Yemi Adamolekun, I would like to start with you. Okay, maybe Yemi Adamolekun is not yet with us in the studio, but Professor Akintenwa, let me start with you. Professor Ishe Sage talked about a whole range of topical issues, beginning with the situation between Delta State and the federal government of Nigeria with regard to what is now known as the Ibori loot. Prof, over to you.
You see, Professor Ishe Sage has not changed, either as a young scholar, old scholar, a public functionary. And I'm particularly glad that he tries his very best to stay the middle line without much commitment, but also providing very powerful arguments to substantiate, to justify his position. Now, let's begin with the issue of COVID-19. Professor Sage should be about 80 years.
He's over 80.
So,
by the grace of God.
In this case, at 80, that is wisdom. But you see, he doesn't want the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine for two main reasons that we cannot set aside. The first one is that, look, you have to take 2 jabs. You take it 2 times. Johnson & Johnson is only once. And again, for his age, it is argued that Johnson & Johnson is better for his age. And I quite subscribe to this reasoning, because on this platform, we have always said that, look, we need to be very, very careful about this issue of vaccination. I've said a number of times that it is on record that the government of Nigeria prefers to think after action. Never before. You can see that while at least not less than 10 countries of the world have suspended temporarily, the vaccination, the use of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines, because of the blood clotting and other side effects. But look at the way our minister, our public officials in Nigeria, look at the way they reason. They argue that the batch that we are concerned with in Nigeria is quite different from the batch and batches obtained elsewhere. Then my question now is this: when do we really know the type of batches sent to Nigeria? Is it when you have taken it and you are having the side effects that you now want to begin to address that? No, it's not good enough. If countries that are more equipped and they are now saying that, look, there is need for caution, shouldn't Nigeria try to tread on the path of caution rather than saying our own is different, we are not experiencing it, and those who have side effects is only mild? No. So in this case, I think I subscribe to the school of thought of Ishe Sage on this particular point. On other issues, for instance, he talked about the AK-47 shoot-at-sight order. And he said that the soldiers are well-trained. This argument, for me, is most unfortunate. He's trying to go the middle line. Another in the military is obey the last order. It is not a function of whether you are well-trained or not. Well, and I will come back and give you an example.
Well, Prof,
Second World War.
Prof, on that note, well, I have caveats to add to that your point about the vaccines. But let's take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back. And Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show, we continue. Stay with us. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on the RISE News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akinterenwa, Director General, Bulitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, and Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. Just before we went on break, Professor Akinterenwa, you were commenting on the shoot-on-sight order by the President of Nigeria and what our guest on today's episode, Professor Ishe Sage, said. Please go ahead.
Professor Sage was trying to make us have the impression that obey the last order in the military tradition can be easily trampled upon by soldiers who are required to execute the order. And I'm saying it cannot work that way. Secondly, when the soldier is faced with death threat, he either kills his enemy first or he will be killed. During the Second World War, let me give you an example of how language can be misunderstood. It was...
That's a whole chapter in my PhD thesis.
Precisely. You see, the American soldier asked the German enemy captured, say, your belt, please. But the German soldier had his pistol hung to his belt. When the American soldier requested for the belt, he only meant that surrender, meaning that you must first of all remove the pistol, and then surrender yourself. But he tried to remove the whole belt with the gun. So in this case, the American soldier misinterpreted that to say, oh, you do not want to surrender. He shot him, and he was killed. So in this case, shoot at sight as an order by Mr. President cannot be literally taken. And we cannot think that, look, the soldier will begin to interpret it themselves. So in a nutshell, I think that as much as I want to agree with Mr. President on this case, that order does not show any seriousness of purpose. Because if you look at AK-47 in the context of herdsmen versus farmers, now the herdsman is a carrier of AK-47. The farmer is not carrying anything. Now, how can a farmer be in a position, for instance, to shoot? And the soldiers are not even in the farms to shoot them.
Well, Prof, let me go quickly to Yemi Adamolekun. Yemi, thank you for joining us. And you listened to Professor Ishe Sage, and he started with the issue of Delta State and the repatriated looted funds. What's your take on the submission by Professor Ishe Sage?
Okay, so good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's interesting. I think his case on face value seems to be appealing. I mean, the point is that it's Delta State's money, so the money should go back to Delta State. But I guess a couple of things. Number one, I'm not quite sure that we have on record that James Ibori ever said he stole the money from Delta State. We assume, because he was governor of Delta, that the money came from Delta. So, and he wasn't charged, if I'm not mistaken, for theft. He was charged for money laundering. So money laundering is a mixed bag. So he might have stolen some from the Delta State Treasury, some might have been proceeds of, I don't know, business or whatever it is. But the fact that it's money laundering means it's a mixed bag. And the fact that we also don't have an affidavit from James Ibori that says, I, James Ibori, hereby stole $4.2 billion or pounds from the Delta State Treasury, so therefore kindly return it to the Delta State Treasury. That's a bit of an issue. Of course, as he said, obviously, yeah, it's the federal government that should negotiate with the UK government as a sovereign nation, true sovereign nation. But I believe the point he made last is in effect what happened in the Memorandum of Understanding that both countries have signed. Since there's a possibility that the loot might be relooted, there is an agreement, and that's what the Memorandum of Understanding, at least the document that I saw, says, is that the money will go back into the coffers of the federal government, and the money will be used against items budgeted for by the federal government. Now, could the federal government have decided that they want to do something that's in Delta State as part of that budget? I guess, yeah, they could have. So maybe it's the choice of projects that we may want to look at and say, why can't you do a federal project in Delta from these funds? But I think it's also quite imperative that, I saw House of Rep member NDG saying it's our money, it should come back to us. As far as I know, Delta State, as Professor Sagi also acknowledged, that for political reasons, they never acknowledged that the money was stolen. They were not part of the effort to retrieve the money. But now suddenly that we have 4.2 million pounds, everybody's saying it's our money, it's our money. When they were stealing the money, you did not tell James Ibori it is your money. When James Ibori returned from jail, he was welcomed like a hero. Nobody said, where is that 4.2 million pounds that you stole? Or he was welcomed as a hero. But now that we found money, Delta suddenly wants to collect money. But the same Delta that wants to collect the 4.2 million pounds, I don't see anybody holding James Ibori accountable. But suddenly we want 4.2 million pounds. So I think I agree with Professor Sage partially, but I think maybe the federal government could, in maybe concession, could have done a project on the budget. Because again, the UK, let's also not be mistaken. I listened to Professor Yemi Kandid, I don't think he's a professor, but Yemi Kandid Johnson, SAN, on a program earlier in the week. And he said it's actually UK's money because they are the ones that did the work, retrieve the money. So in partnership with the Nigerian government, they said to make sure that this money is not relooted, this is how we would be comfortable with giving you back this money. And it's quite their prerogative to do that.
Well, I guess the caveat that should be added is that James Ibori was really never charged in Nigeria, and he was not convicted in Nigeria. He was arrested by the international police in Dubai and then taken to the United Kingdom, where the case was instituted against him on money laundering charges, as you have pointed out, under international, public international law. But in any case, that's where we are with that. In Nigeria, in fact, every effort was made to frustrate any attempt to charge him or put him to trial.
Exactly.
Yeah, but very quickly, Professor Ariole.
Now,
what are your thoughts?
I see, Professor Issa Sage would have told us... Issa Sage. Okay, would have told us what happened exactly at the time the former governor of Delta State was under trial or was about to be asked to prove how he got his money or not. But that wasn't done. So which means if federal government has been in position to negotiate with Britain to return the money, and as we are talking, there is an agreement. So the fact that the country that wants to return the money has set some conditions, and we expect those conditions to go on. And thereafter, if Delta State feels that there is something wrong, they can now sue the federal government for that. But what we need now is that whatever project is required or are tied to such money to come back to Nigeria, let it be allowed to happen. Once it happens, Nigeria would have been seen as having respected the benevolence of the country that want to return the money. Then within us, we can now do an internal fighting and see how it could be solved. But for now, I think the important thing is to get the money back to Nigeria. And if there are conditions set on getting the money back to Nigeria, let it be respected by Nigeria, like the Attorney General is trying to do. Thereafter, Delta State could now sue the federal government to get its money back if it feels that the money really belongs to Delta State. That's one. Secondly, on the national income or whatever, what the minimum wage. Yes, because we need to state clearly that it is not fine to have if you discriminatory national minimum wage, if you call it national minimum wage, let it be national minimum wage. And then People who want to pay higher can pay higher. As we are talking today, America could be seen as the best practice in terms of setting what is national minimum wage.
Well, Prof, let's take another quick break.
Okay.
We'll come back to you here on this day, the Sunday Talk Show. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday Talk Show here on our RISE News channel. Joining me now, still with me, Professor Bola Akintenewa, Director General, Bulitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough, Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos. Well, Professor Ariole, before we went on break, you were talking about the national minimum wage. Well, you still get a chance to talk about it, in the course of this program, because we have it as a separate topic. But meanwhile, let's take on another subject of interest. Nigeria's Minister of State for Petroleum, Timipre Sylva, has refuted claims of an increase in the current price of petrol. He called on marketers not to create artificial scarcity and hoarding occasioned by such unsubstantiated claims. Conversations on the increase in the price of premium motor spirit were sparked by the Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency's now deleted template, announcing the new price of petrol at a cap of 212 naira per litre. The deletion came hours after the agency published the template on its website and after the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation insisted that there was no increment in the ex-depot price of petrol. The ex-depot price is the price at which the product is sold by the NNPC to marketers at the depots. According to the now deleted template, which the PPPRA released, petrol is expected to sell at a lower retail price of 200 naira.61 and at an upper retail price of 212.61 naira. Nigerian marketers usually use the upper band for pump price. Well, in the course of the week, this is what we face. People started selling petrol at 212.61 kobo per litre. And there was a lot of, outrage, anxiety across, Lagos, where we live. And but 24 hours later, we were told that the president of Nigeria himself, who is the Minister of Petroleum Resources, was not aware of this change in pump price of petrol. The NNPC was also not aware. The NNPC insisted that there will be no change in the pump price of fuel in the month of March. The PPPRA, the regulatory agency for petroleum pricing, quickly deleted the template that it had published. And everyone was confused about whether or not, government is working at cross purposes. I know that Professor Sage commented on this a bit, but Yemi, let me start with you. Why is it so difficult for the Nigerian government to be clear about its policies in the downstream sector and about the pricing of petroleum? In March, April, we were told that market forces would determine the pump price of petrol. But we are now faced with a situation whereby, even the president of Nigeria, who is the Minister of Petroleum Resources, does not know what is going on in that sector with regard to pricing. And he has had to apologize by proxy. Yemi, over to you.
Okay. Starting point, I think the fact that, let's start where you ended with Mr. President. I think the fact that Mr. President is Minister of Petroleum and he wasn't aware tells us a lot. I mean, we've seen it over the last 6 years of things happening, and we consistently wonder, is Mr. President aware? That's why people ask questions. Is he really there? Is he Jubril from Sudan? Is he aware of things? Is he being briefed? Does he know what's going on? Is he making decisions, or are people making decisions on his behalf? So the narrative keeps feeding itself about a president that's really not in control or not aware of happenings within the country. And the Ministry of Petroleum Resources is just a microcosm of that on a larger scale. We've seen it within security and some of the other issues that you flagged. So on this particular issue, the lack of clarity is because we're not clear. So we can't be clear about what we're not clear about. Our petroleum industry bill, part of it is still stuck in the National Assembly. We haven't decided as a country if we want to deregulate the downstream sector, which would mean that pump prices will fluctuate as the market price of crude fluctuates. So we say that in one vein, we release a template. So if it's based on market forces, why is a government agency releasing a price template? I'm not quite sure where else that happens in the world, where you say it's technically deregulated. Just as we say Boko Haram was technically defeated. So now we're technically deregulated, but a government agency is still telling us what to charge for petroleum. And then when the one government agency, you've told me to be doing template and publish it, fine. They do their job, quote and unquote. The political, social repercussions of that is the fact that the price of petrol goes up, the price of everything goes up, which is what the issue always is. And then government is suddenly like, wow, we can't afford this. We're just coming out of a pandemic. People are struggling. Okay, let's deny that it didn't really happen because we went. So it's just confusion because we're not clear. Neither are we honest. Neither do we have a clear plan. Are we deregulating this thing? If we're deregulating this thing, what are what's the word I'm looking for? The palliatives, the cushions that we're putting in place for people? Because as we've seen over and over again, once you deregulate petroleum, transportation goes up, cost of food goes up, everything goes up. So in the midst of a pandemic where we're still doing, I mean, you spent 30 minutes talking to, I forget the name of the gentleman, about the social safety net that the country has that covers, I don't know what percentage of the population. So yeah, we're not clear because the policy is not clear, and the minister in charge of it is not clear because he's also not present. So problems.
Well, Professor Arele, over to you. Did you end up buying fuel at 212 naira,
no, the point
61
is,
kobo one day, and then at 162 naira the following day?
It's a flip-flop statement from both the minister and the NNPC or PPRA. I don't see, if you have already agreed that it should be deregulated, market forces should take place. I don't see what PPPRA is doing again in the Nigerian stage. Seriously speaking, I know it affects all of us, but there is a way to go about it. For example, when Macron took power in France, he had problem with the Gilets jaunes. Gilets jaunes, that's the yellow jacket people. It was still based on this petroleum issue, tax issue that goes with buying fuel, which means if you don't consume rightly what you're supposed to consume, the tax of what you are consuming will go high. And people were worried about those things, and they were fighting government on that. What I'm trying to say is that there is no regulatory organ like PPPRA in the France case. It's like government against the people. Fine. When PPRA is intervening, it's like a saboteur in the whole business, as far as I'm concerned. Even when you are traveling from USA to Canada, you will see when the prices changes, it changes, they put it there. The amount of whatever dollar per gallon. Nobody protests, nobody, because they have already, if you like, they have already cushioned the effect somehow, which we wouldn't know. And they won't call it subsidy. But Nigerian government should come with what could look like subsidy so that the people will not always be complaining about fuel price increase or no increase. Somehow Nigerians have agreed, without expressing it, that the subsidy issue has gone into heavy corruption, which they are fighting up till now. They can't even get out of it, the EFCC. Many of them who have taken money from that subsidy are still in court with EFCC, and we haven't seen any result of them being convicted or not being convicted up to today. So Nigerians are really tired, but government should really do something about taxing people who are excessively, having petroleum consumption beyond what they're supposed to have. We are talking of 100 million liters per day for Nigeria. I used to hear 30 million liters, 2014. Now I'm hearing 100 million liters per day.
Don't rely on those figures.
Yeah, whatever it is, government should really know how many liters per day Nigerians are consuming?
Nobody knows.
Yeah, but they have to do it. That's the job of government. You must know how many liters your people are consuming a day. If you like, you give all the contract to NNPC to supply that 100 million liters a day. And so we wouldn't have problem. NNPC is part of government. People can now be fighting NNPC, not necessarily fighting the marketers. The marketers are business people. They're on their own. They want to make profit. It's left for them to decide how much they want to sell. But it's left for government to say, look, NNPC belong to government. This is what NNPC want to sell petrol 1 liter. And if everybody want to go and buy it in NNPCC, let them go. If there is crowd there that will create confusion of Boko Haram, God help Nigeria. So, but that's how it should be. Government should do something.
Well, Professor Akintenewa, your take on this?
I cannot agree more with Yemi, as well as...
Yemi cannot be more correct.
He cannot be more correct. You see, precisely on March 19th, 2020, the federal government of Nigeria announced the deregulation. So it is not that government has not announced. Government has actually announced. It's on record, March 19, 2020. The issue is that President Muhammadu Buhari is governing Nigeria by flying kites, by trying the public. So they will come out with what they do not intend to do. So, depending on reaction of the public, then they will now come out with a counter position and then trying to hold someone responsible. Many are the cases. The pattern is very clear. For instance, you say there is no petroleum subsidy anymore. That's what you will declare in the morning. The following morning, the contrary is the case. How many times have we been told that there wouldn't be any subsidy? Secondly, when you do say that you are deregulating, as Professor Ariole rightly pointed out, what is the essence again for PPP-RA? What really is the need for? Absolutely nothing. You see, the lesson to learn from this is this. The policy of government will never be clear. Will never be clear, as you want us to explain. Why? Because the government itself is not clear about its agenda. The government doesn't know what it really wants. And for as long as the policy is not well articulated, and we do not really know what the policy focus is all about, then it will be meandering. It will be moving around vicious circle. And essentially, at the end of the day, how will you expect an increment from 162 to 212? You can always be increasing gradually, but a situation whereby you don't care about the impact of the policy on the poor people of Nigeria, then I think the government is unnecessarily trying to fish in troubled waters. That's the way I want to look at it.
Well, Prof, on that note, we'll take another short break here on Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. When we return, the conversation will continue. Don't go away. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on the RISE News channel. I still have with me in the studio Professor Bola Akintenewa, former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs and currently Director General of the Bolitak Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun is also still here, Executive Director in Officing of, and Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. Well, let's move on to the next subject, which is about the national minimum wage. Earlier this week, nationwide protests gripped Nigeria over the proposed amendments to the minimum wage in the country. Punarimam Feintola reports. Sorry, Feintola, struggling with your name. Here is that report by Feintola. All right.
Are protected. The National Assembly has plans to remove the minimum wage, allowing state governments to negotiate directly with their staff. That's something that caused anger during nationwide protest on Wednesday. The demonstrators reached the National Assembly and kept going. They were met with some resistance by security, but it wasn't enough to stop them.
They must hear our voice. Sorry. We have one voice. They must hear our voice. We have one voice.
Protesters laid siege to the National Assembly, threatening to disrupt parliamentary proceedings if their demands are not met. Union leaders addressed the workers on their rights, saying the minimum wage is in line with international standards.
Comrades, we are here today on behalf of Nigerian workers, on behalf of Nigerian pensioners, on behalf of the downtrodden, to make it clear and unambiguous that the bill that seeks to remove the minimum wage from the exclusive list to the concurrent list is not accepted. Let me say that the issue of national minimum wage is a standard set by the International Labour Organization.
The workers are met by lawmakers who promise to give the bill their attention.
For what I'm seeing now, it appears to me and to the leadership that the organized labor are against that bill. And if you are against that bill, you are right, you have your reasons to be against it. We'll be on the ground in the green chamber of the House of Representatives to do justice to that bill. And I can understand the only justice to that bill is to kill the bill. Is that your position? Is that your position? Is that what you want? Remember in the 8th Assembly, I was the spokesman of the Senate. And I recall vividly, this issue of minimum wage was brought and we killed it. Your president is here. And because of that, I want to believe, has the conditions that led to the 8th Assembly decision changed? Nigerian workers, has the condition changed? I therefore want to say very clearly that in the past, we have stood toe to toe with the Nigerian workers. There is nothing that suggests we are changing from that direction. Rather, we will stand by you to ensure that the fundamental right of every worker is not only enforced, but is ensured and guaranteed.
Protests took place across Nigeria, with workers complaining of a rise in fuel and electricity prices, an increase in the cost of food, and a high rate of unemployment. Punarman Feintola, RISE News.
Well, brilliant report there by Punariman Feintola, RISE correspondent, on the protest by organized labor this week. Well, Professor Ariole, earlier on you were talking about the national minimum wage in response to some of the things said by Professor Ishesage. And now we have a report by our RISE correspondent Punariman Feintola. What's your take?
No, Professor Ishesage is a lawyer and he's a son. He ought to know ILO is like a supranational body, and they're trying to tell you that there is minimum standard expected of every nation. And as we are talking today, with COVID-19 palliative and relief packages spread world over, US itself is knowing that inflation will set in. And they have decided to regulate their own minimum wage to be $15 per hour, which means within 8 hours, somebody could make $120, which is the minimum ILO standard for labor work. So even in Nigeria, 1 day salary of a US worker is what Nigerians are struggling for 1 month to get. That is 30,000 minimum wage, which they are talking about. That is just a benchmark. US is a federal nation, federation, like Nigeria is also a federation. And the federation set a benchmark. Government of Nigeria should set a benchmark upon which others could either pay higher, but not lower, like is done in Germany. Everybody knows that if somebody in Western Germany earns bigger than somebody in Eastern Germany, it's not because they don't know what is the basic. The basic is like what has been set in Eastern Germany or East Germany is what remains basic. But the West Germany that has a higher standard of living before ever decide to have a higher wage. There's no that one is even confederation. I see Germany as confederation, which could even be tolerated, just like in Switzerland also, as a confederation could be tolerated with what goes on in the cantons. But for Nigeria, that has something like American system, which is federation, the moment the federal government has set a benchmark, nobody should go below it. Saying that some states don't have money to pay, the best way they could do maybe is to reduce the number of people they put in their employment or outsource. Like I had once said.
No, not reduce the people in their employment. Maybe they cut down the cost of governance.
Whatever. Cost of governance is employment, maybe politicians, they are paying.
Reduce the number of special assistants.
Exactly. The legislations and whatever. Cut it down. But let the minimum standards set by the national body, which is the federal government, be maintained for anybody working in that state. Don't go below. Going below is treating human beings as subhuman. That is, some human beings will be regarded as human beings and others will be regarded as subhumans. And we don't expect that to happen in Nigeria if we really want to have a very good integrated nation. Of course, we are suffering from a disintegration for now because here and there people are talking. We are trying to see how centripetal our decisions could be. And that centripetal movement does not allow for centrifugal minimum wage business for now. That's how I see it.
Well, Yemi, let me come to you just before we go on the next break. What's your take on this? Should workers be placed at the mercy of governors or state governments in the name of federalism?
Okay. Well, I guess it goes back to this ongoing conversation about how we engage as a federation and what that means. And I think, as Professor Ariole said, and also Professor Sagi, our constitution as it currently exists and ILO conventions speak to, I'm not a lawyer, but seem to speak to a federal minimum wage. And to Professor Sagi's point, that the governors then need to align and determine that whatever will be the federal minimum wage is a wage that the poorest state can afford. So that way nobody goes below it. But I do certainly agree that the cost of living in Ekiti is very different than the cost of living in Lagos or Yobe or Katsina. So for me, it doesn't make any sense that a worker in Ekiti earns the same as a worker in Lagos or UB or whatever. I believe Lagos has found a way to add to what the federal minimum wage is. So that should be what we're aspiring to. So there is a federal minimum wage that is the lowest that any state can pay. So no state can argue that they can't pay that. They must be able to pay it. And that's agreed. But then every state that is able to pay more then pays more. So that this whole notion of, again, back to how we engage our states, independence of states, has life. So I can choose to move from Imo to Lagos and I can be hired in Lagos to work. And it's not what is your state of origin? That silly question is a non-issue. And if I move from Imo to Lagos because I have the skills and I can add value to civil service in Lagos, I can get paid accordingly.
Well, Yemi, on that note, we'll take another short break here on Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. When we return, the conversation will continue. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on the RISE News channel. Still with me in the studio, Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitech Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, and Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. Before we went on break, Prof, we were discussing the matter of the national minimum wage, whether it should be on the exclusive list or it should be on the concurrent list as proposed by members of the House of Representatives. What do you think?
Let us begin with the submission of Professor Sagi and as supported by Yemi and Victor. as much as I want to agree with the supranational character of international labor conventions, it is important to underscore the point that Nigeria is not a monist country. Nigeria subscribes to the dualist school of thought. The implication of that dualism is simply that whatever is agreed to internationally must not only be ratified, but it must also be domesticated for it to be enforced municipally in Nigeria. So the problem is not stricto sensu the international labor agreement. The issue is that at the municipal level, the labor unions had already reached agreement on the basis of collective bargaining. We had the federal government, the state government, and the private stakeholders that agreed. Initially, the labor unions insisted on 67,000 naira minimum wage. But as a result of the negotiations that followed, and on the basis of conviction and the conditionality of capacity to pay, the labor unions agreed to the idea of 30,000 naira minimum wage. So it is this agreement that is at stake. Now the government is not living up to expectation, is not respecting the principle of a sanctity of agreements. And that is why I think that the labor unions were right, quite logical, quite patriotic in fighting altruistically for all others. That is the issue. I think that in this case, if you look at the international labor mechanism for minimum wage, as done as far back as 1928, look at their document number 26. They have been on this minimum wage. The labor unions are asking for a national minimum wage. Please understand that word, national minimum wage. Not a minimum wage that will be determined by the constitutive states of Nigeria or by federal or federalism. No. So let there be standardization, and that's what the international law requires.
Well, Prof, you are quite correct, and the concern also is about the behavior of the subnationals in Nigeria. If you were to leave the fixing of minimum wage to the state governments, with the extravagance that we have seen, with the waste that we have seen, in fact, they can insist on zero minimum wage.
Seriously?
Even with the national minimum wage, do they pay? They don't. They pay only percentages. So, as Professor Sage pointed out, this is a matter of clash of interests, and it is within the legitimate right of Nigerian workers to defend and protest about their own interests. Now to security. The National Security Advisor, Babagana Monguno, has denied that he ever said funds made for the purchase of arms under the former service chiefs are missing. In a statement from his office, the National Security Advisor is reported to have been misquoted, and his comments during a BBC Hausa interview clarified to mean enormous resources were provided for arms procurement, but the orders are either inadequate or yet to be delivered, and the president is following up on the procurement process. Meanwhile, in a bid to end banditry in the northwest of the country, the service chiefs visited the Katsina State governor, who called for the use of modern technology in the fight against banditry as they continue working with all security agencies towards lasting peace.
Situation where the command was dissolved, border lines between Katsina and Zamfara, between Katsina and Kaduna, between Kaduna and Niger, and between Niger and Kebbi, between Zamfara and Kebbi, and between Sokoto and Kebbi. So that operations will be going on simultaneously from all sides.
Whereas we've moved a little, quite made some movement, but we also recognize that quite a lot that we still need to do. And also encouraging the citizens of your states to provide useful information that will enable us to bring Mr. President's intentions to fruition.
Well, you know, many Nigerians argued that if the service chiefs were to be changed, maybe there would be some improvement with the security situation in Nigeria. But since General Irabo and his team took over the security architecture in Nigeria, as they like to call it, we've been having one problem after another. This week alone, there was kidnapping in Urumi in Edo State, at a school of technology. The very following day, there was also the abduction of 39 students from the School of Forestry in Kaduna State, right? And one after the other, we have these issues. And in the midst of all of that, the National Security Advisor has been double speaking about whether money was mishandled, misappropriated, misplaced by the former service chiefs. Although the former service chief, Buratai, has had cause to come forward to say no money was missing, and the National Security Advisor has also backtracked. But Yemi, let me come to you. What does this say to you as a Nigerian who just wants to live in a country where you can be safe?
Well, it just reinforces what we all know and what we've been talking about for a while, that there is, again, our missing president, or is it our unaware president? That things are happening that people are unaware of, and people are making decisions, and things are happening that there are no consequences. Which, for Professor Sage to say that he's surprised people are not coming forward whistleblowing, I think it's just a reflection of sort of a larger issue of people. I mean, his committee, for example, was a committee that was everybody talked about in the early days because there were high expectations. They would do this, they would do that. Maybe because they're now a think tank, so they're out of the limelight and we don't know what they're doing. But I mean, even the prominence of his committee speaks a lot to how people are engaging in this corruption matter. But again, fundamentally, when there are no consequences, actions have consequences, guaranteed. So if the consequence of a bad action is nothing happens to you, you are not fired, as we saw with our service chiefs, you're not prosecuted, you are instead given approved to be posted as ambassadors, then people will take opportunities presented to them. Now, NSA Monguno is actually quite interesting. I was just reading a transcript of his BBC interview where he said these things. And yes, what he did say he's not saying anybody stole any money, but he said we cannot see the money and we cannot see what the money was used for. So I don't know what else we're to infer from that. We can't see the money. So he said maybe the arms are on their way from America or from wherever they were purchased from, but we can't see it. And so to your point, I have no expectations that with new service chiefs that will suddenly know what we're doing. It will take the service chiefs some time to settle in. It will take them some time to pick the battles they want to fight. It will take them some time to align, especially if you're within a larger structure that doesn't seem to want to deal with the problem. They're just individuals. But what we will see, which is what we're seeing now, is that things will begin to drop. If we didn't change service chiefs, the NSA would not have said what he said, because there would not have been an opportunity for him to say what he said. But because we have new service chiefs, the new service chiefs are saying, we can't, what you want us to do, we can't, because there are no resources. The NSA slips up in a Hausa, says what he says, now has to backtrack rather than explaining. And so we're explaining and explaining and explaining, but no way forward. And I don't know if you want to talk about since we're talking about security, the president's statement about AK-47, or you're coming back to that?
No, go ahead. It was one of the questions I asked Professor Sage. Yes, please go ahead.
Here are the top search results.
Thank you. So I think it's critical in that, very important. And I like the way you framed it to Professor Sage when you said it would seem that the president is sanctioning extrajudicial killing. And that's not without context. The context is because the Nigerian security agents, the police and the army are known for extrajudicial killing. Even though for the army, they say they don't engage unless they plan to kill you. That's the MO. I'm not an official, but someone during the NSAS protest that was said in relation to how it's different, how the police engage and how the military engage, that the military basically shoot to kill, but the police can dialogue and step down and all of that. But Nigeria has a history of extrajudicial killing. So for a president, a commander-in-chief, to say that if you see someone with an A47, he didn't caveat it. He didn't say if the A47 is by the foot, if they are just slinging it on their shoulder. If I heard him correctly, he said if you see anyone with an AK-47, shoot them on sight. He didn't say if they cock the AK-47 at you and you are doing it to self-defense or they're using it to other people. And I believe it was Professor Akinteriwa that made that point. Within that context, and he said, Professor Sake said as well, that he expects them, in a sense, he implied, sorry, he didn't say it, he implied that he expects them to use their discretion because the president's statement came with discretion. I'm sorry, I didn't hear discretion in Mr. President's statement. And so, in my opinion, I believe that the president has given security agencies license to kill. So even if the thing looks like an AK-47, possibly might be, you will say that, oh, I thought it was an AK-47 and I shot because Mr. President said I could. Now, if a security agent says that in a court of law or anywhere, who will hold him? He's following orders from his commander-in-chief.
Yes.
And
of course,
that is, I'm sorry, illegal. I don't understand how the president is basically saying shoot anybody you see if you think they're holding an AK-47 because we must deal with security, so we're shooting everybody you see. That's literally what our president just
Well, point well made, Yemi Adamolekun. Executive Director, enough is enough. Well, quickly, let me come to you, Professor Ariole. She has raised very interesting points.
I'm really wondering why the name Kalashnikov, AK-47 is Kalashnikov, it's pure Russian. I'm just worried whether the president is against the Russian alone, because it's not only AK-47 people will be carrying about now, unless it has been...
There's also AK-49.
Unless it has been made...
the newest version.
Exactly, unless it's just Russian ammunition that is entering Nigeria, I wouldn't know. Maybe if you're carrying a British version of the ammunition, nothing will happen to you. I don't know. It's possible. We don't really know. But all I know is that Commander-in-Chief has given order. And as far as I know in this Nigeria, no military man will see any bloody civilian holding a gun. He is just to be shot. No two way about that. The military don't tolerate you holding a gun because they feel it is their own monopoly to have a gun and not you, a bloody civilian. And so if it is really the instruction, the military will not even be looking for whether you are hanging it or you are putting it down. They will just mess you up and waste you.
Prof, on that note, we'll take another short break here on Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on the RISE News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akinteriwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies, University of Lagos, Nigeria. Well, Prof, I was going to come to you before we took that break. Over to you, Professor Akinteriwa.
I am very surprised that President Muhammadu Buhari, as Commander-in-Chief, will not be in a position to know whether a given military funds would be missing or not missing. He's the Commander-in-Chief. He's supposed to be the depository of knowledge on this matter. Secondly, President Buhari is not on record to have given any positive impression that he's actually fighting corruption. He's not. Even under the same National Security Advisor, Monguno headed an official panel that investigated the coordinator of the presidential amnesty program. The coordinator was said to have been involved. They are looking for 12-point-something billion. Nothing happened. And most unfortunately, under the same Monguno NSA, a letter was sent to somebody who was suspended, who was sanctioned, appreciating what he had done. President Buhari is appreciating somebody who looted money, allegedly. So in this case, you cannot understand if they say the money is missing in the morning, then in the afternoon it's a different story.
Well, in the specific matter before us, General Monguno has said that he was quoted out of context. Well, journalists get blamed all the time for quoting people out of context, but I guess the average Nigerian is more interested in the truth. Let's move on. More than 27 states and the Federal Capital Territory have received delivery of their COVID-19 vaccine allocations from the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency in Nigeria. These include Delta, Lagos, Kaduna, Akwa Ibom, Ogun, Ondo, Osun, Ekiti, Nasarawa, Benue, and Bauchi states, to name just a few states. They have confirmed receipt of their allocations of the AstraZeneca vaccine. The states state that vaccination will commence in line with the scheduled guidelines put in place by the NPHCDA. On the global scene, senior World Health Organization officials claim that so-called vaccine passports for international travel during the COVID-19 pandemic have ethical considerations due to potential inequality, and there are practical and ethical considerations for countries that are considering using vaccine certification as a condition for travel, and the UN Health Agency advises against it for now.
The use of certification of vaccination as a requirement for travel is not advised, because quite simply vaccination is just not available enough around the world, and is not available certainly on an equitable basis. But I think there are real practical and ethical considerations as well that countries will have to address, because if access to vaccine is inequitous, then inequity and unfairness can be further branded into the system if we continue to make decisions on what people can and can't do, where they can and can't go, on the basis of being vaccinated, when being vaccinated itself is not something that everyone has equal access to.
Well, Professor Akintenewa, let me start with you. Vaccine passports are already adopted and announced by some countries of the world and some international organizations. But the WHO is saying this is not advisable.
The World Health Organization cannot be more correct
yes.
This time. If you look at the history of what they call world passport, there's a world passport. The headquarters is based in Basel, Switzerland. The passport is normally meant for the apatrides, that is, people without nationality or people who are misplaced, but to enable them to still travel
stateless persons
worldwide. They introduced this type of passport for them. But the issue is that most countries of the world do not recognize that. They prefer that you still have your national passport. How is this one related to this vaccination passport? You see, some countries are against Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine now. You can now imagine a holder of a passport from such countries. Why wouldn't you expect the principle of reciprocity? Now, it cannot be good. The World Health Organization is quite right to discourage that. Secondly, when you look at the vaccination politics of it, the WHO spokesperson made it clear. He talked about inequity there. If, for instance, people do not have free access to all this, not everyone has access to it, meaning, implying that when you do not have access to it, you can therefore not have access to the passport. Then are you not going to be victimized? Are you not going to be unnecessarily punished? And more significantly, increasing number of countries in the world are suspending. We do not have less than 10 countries right now looking at that. In Nigeria, what is the batch that we are interested in? Which batch are we giving? I think we need to make haste slowly when it comes to this.
The Nigerian government, through the NPHCDA, has said that the batch that is controversial in Europe is not the one that we have here. The batch that has generated controversy is the ABV 5300. And we're told that that's not the batch we have here in Nigeria. But very quickly, Yemi Adamolekun, we have just about 2 minutes to wrap up the program. Vaccine passports and international relations.
Well, while I agree with the WHO, but I think it's, quite frankly, it's inevitable. It might not be called that, but the simple underlying point of it is that countries will determine who they want to come in. That's why we have visas. So if countries decide that you must get tested from your home country, when you arrive in their country, you'll get tested. You might be quarantined. A country like Mauritius, for example, if you want to go there, they're basically not open. But if you want to go, you must have money to show that you can live there for a year because they don't want people going in and out. I don't think that policy has changed, but that was the initial policy after the lockdown. But we all carry yellow fever passports around, or passports if I want to use that around, but not every country requires it, but some countries do. So if you think of COVID in that sense, there are some countries invariably, they might not call it that, but by the time they put all the steps in place for you to come into their country, that would invariably be what it is.
Well, Professor Ariole, the last word on this, in just about a minute.
Because the vaccines are not concoction for saving one against COVID-19. But what NAFDAC TGG said, the one we are having is 68% potency. The other ones are 95, 94. So generally, as World Health Organization is saying, there is still no certainty of what will make that vaccine passport valid. Because some country will claim what you are coming in with is not suitable for us. We won't accept the passport vaccine you are having for AstraZeneca or the other one, Johnson. All depends. And so there will be cacophony. So there is need to really obey what World Health Organization is saying.
Thank you very much, Professor Ariole. Thank you, Professor Akintenewa. And thank you very much, Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, In Office Enough. You've been watching Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on RISE News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next week.